Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. Nelson Mandela. With this phrase, I'd like to welcome all of you, and on behalf of the La Sallian community, thank you for being here. Brother Jose Francisco Flores Gamio, Rector of La Salle University in Mexico, Master Ana Marcela Castellanos Guzman, Academic Vice Rector, Brother Roberto Medina Luna Anaya, Vice Rector of Student Life and Formation, Dr. Eduardo Gomez Ramirez, Research Vice Rector, Master Jose Maria Aramburu Alonso, Academic Support Director, Your Excellency, Mr. Wilfred Theo Mohr, Ambassador of the Netherlands in Mexico, thank you, Master Alejandro Torres Gonzalez, Director of Administration, school directors, staff of the Language Center, coordinators, students, and to everyone that is here with us today, thank you. Through the years, we've become more aware of the changes in our everyday life, of the needs that our society faces, the challenges we face day to day, and one of the most important one is education. Education for new generations, generations that are changing constantly at a very high speed, where technology shows us what's going on in seconds through its media. Generations that need knowledge, and not only knowledge, but a wider understanding of the world, of the people, of everything that surrounds us. Respect of the world we live in and for each other. This is where we, as a great university, can make the difference. And this is where we, as La Sallians, have to get involved and make this difference happen. Being global means crossing borders, not only in a physical way, also virtually, getting involved in issues not only of education, of ecology, of languages. Being global means understanding other cultures, other people, other thoughts. Language opens new opportunities in a personal and in a professional way. They are the link to the world, to communicate, to learn, and to see through the eyes of others. Languages are a window to the world. And as Federico Fellini said, a different language is a different vision of life. Thank you for being here, and thanks for being part of this great adventure. Indi Visa Manet.
The time has come to listen to our distinguished guest, Your Excellency, Mr. Wilfred Theo Mohr, Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Mexico and Belize, with the main theme is the student in a global world. Now I am reading a brief review of Your Excellency, Ambassador Wilfred Theo Mohr. Wilfred Mohr, Ambassador to Mexico and Belize. City of residence, Mexico City. Birthplace, Zon aan Breakwil, the Netherlands. Career, from 2020 to this time, Ambassador of the Netherlands to Mexico and Belize. From 2019 to 2020, Advisor to the Department of Human Resources, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. From 2016 to 2019, Inspector. From 2012 to 2016, Consul General in Hong Kong and Macau. From 2010 to 2012, member of the Board Directorate of Export Promotion, Ministry of Economic Affairs, Agriculture and Innovation. 27, Charge d'Affaires of the Netherlands Embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan. From 26 to 2010, Deputy Director of Human Resources. He joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1986 and worked in Norway and Indonesia, in addition to the Department of the Directorates of International Organizations, European Integration, Asia and Oceania, and Human Resources. His education started in 1979 to 1985, Business Economics, University of Groningen. His language skills: Dutch, English, French, German, and Spanish. Very welcome.
Put this up a little bit. We Dutchmen are very tall. Hallo, mijn naam is Wilfred Mohr en ik ben de ambassadeur van Nederland in Mexico. Depuis quelques années, je vis au Mexique et avant de venir ici, j'étais consul général à Hong Kong y a Macao. Gracias por recibirme en esta hermosa universidad. Me gustaría hablar sobre la importancia de saber varios idiomas para el desarrollo profesional, no solo en una carrera como diplomático, sino en cualquier área. As you know, languages are important, and that is the theme of my presentation today. But before going into the content, I would like to congratulate the University of La Salle, especially the Language Center, for its 50th anniversary. I think it's a real milestone if you are 50 years in business, teaching students foreign languages. I think you started early because languages were not that popular early on, but 50 years merits a congratulation. And also for me, it's a great honor and a great pleasure to be here today at this fantastic university, which started, the director just explained to me, many hundred years ago in France, in Reims, the Champagne region, and over the centuries it's basically expanded all over the world, and you have in many cities and countries you have campuses now. It's completely different from the university set up in the Netherlands, where you have one university in one city. This is very different. But I think if you can exist for more than a few centuries, I think you are an institution of honor and of dignity, and it's here to stay. As I said, my talk today is why foreign languages are important, and I would like to do a little quiz with you. Which language do you think is the most spoken language in the world? Is it Chinese? Is it English? What do you think? Hands up. English? Who thinks it's English? It's not a majority. Chinese? Bit more hands. Hindi? Do you know Hindi? Hindi is the language they speak in India, also a country of 1 billion inhabitants. No, you have statistics and statistics, of course, and the most spoken language is English. And that's because it's not only spoken in English-speaking countries, but in many countries besides these English-speaking countries. And the second language, most spoken language is Mandarin, and that is because China is a huge country with 1.4 billion inhabitants. So yeah, then you jump into the ranks pretty easy. Hindi is third, the language of India. Spanish follows in the fourth place because of Latin America, Spain, and probably also it's spoken in many other countries besides this continent and Spain. French as well, because many people in Africa also speak French. And then follows Arabic, Middle East, of course, and Bengali. Bengali is the language they speak in Bangladesh and parts of India, in the east part of India. Russian, Portuguese, and finally Indonesian. Indonesian has an archipelago in Asia where they speak one language, Bahasa Indonesia, and Indonesia has more than 250 million inhabitants, so therefore it's widely spoken. But of course there's another. Let's say, I don't know if we have the slides, because I have it on my presentation. It says next slide, but I don't see if there are any slides. Otherwise we do it without the slides. But the most spoken language of native languages, so that these are people living in a certain country speak, of course then it's Chinese is the biggest language, Mandarin. Spanish follows, then English, only in the third place. And this means that, Mandarin is the most spoken language in the world, but it's not that popular. It's a very difficult language. It's a language which is constructed totally different from let's say, our European languages, because it's not a language of vowels and syllables, and it's a tone language. So for instance, the word ma in Chinese, you can pronounce it in 5 different levels of intonations. Ma, very long, or ma, short, or ma, and it all means different things. So it's a very different language to master, because you have 7 different tones, and that makes it quite different. But let me tell you a little bit about my own experiences with languages. I was born in the Netherlands, as the moderator told. The first 10 years of my life, I lived in the Netherlands. I didn't move abroad. I was never abroad in the first 10 years of my life, so I only spoke Dutch. And then my father, who worked for a Dutch multinational called Philips, he was asked to move abroad to become the director of Philips in Morocco, a country in North Africa. And then I had to go to a French school. So I finished in June my classes in Dutch, and in September I had to begin in a French school speaking French. As a boy of 10 years old, it was quite a challenge, I must admit. But we stayed 5 years, and after 5 years my French was as fluent as my Dutch. And I was able to upkeep it because I still have friends from these times. And I very often go on holidays to France, so I was able to upkeep my French language. And French became my second language, basically. And then we went back to the Netherlands, and in the Netherlands it's customary that at school, all children are taught in 3 languages, foreign languages. So that is English, French, and German. That's compulsory for everybody, for at least 4 years, but most people do it for 6 years. And and that was the languages people were taught in my days. But nowadays you can also choose Spanish or Chinese. So we have accustomed our education system because we know the Spanish-speaking countries, and especially China, is becoming an important economic force in the world. And children and students want to learn these languages. So sometimes they drop French and German, and they start learning Spanish and Chinese, which I think is good because it also shows that you have to evaluate according to what's happening in the world. But why do we teach all these languages to our children? That is, as you know, the Netherlands is not a super large country. It is fairly small in size, but we have a very large international presence. This is something which we have been having over the centuries. In the 16th and in the 17th century, the Netherlands became a kind of an explorer of the world. We looked for opportunities for trade and for commerce, and we traveled all the way to Asia, but also to Latin America, to Brazil, to Africa. And in order to be able to communicate with these people, we needed to learn languages, basically. And this is the case until today, where the Netherlands, as I said, is a small country, but we push well above our weight, economically speaking. We are the 16th economy of the world. Mexico is the 14th. And we are a big trading nation, so we call ourselves a little bit the gateway to Europe. So it means that we try to bring as much goods from overseas to our harbor in Rotterdam or to the airport in Amsterdam. And from there we repack and we redistribute it all over Europe. And in order to communicate with all these people in Europe, but also further overseas, you need to speak languages. Otherwise, you cannot make yourself known. And that's why we emphasize so much the knowledge of foreign languages in the Netherlands. And another argument nowadays is that the Netherlands has many multinational companies, also present in Mexico, like Shell, Philips, Heineken, Unilever, Axo, KLM. These are all Dutch companies, always present here in Mexico. And staffing of these companies, you need to speak your language. You cannot operate in Mexico in a Dutch company or in any other field if you don't speak Spanish. So that's why we emphasize all these languages. Another argument is that when you are a member of an international organization, and the Netherlands is like Mexico, member of many of them, the UN, the OECD. We are also a member of the EU and of NATO. You have to speak these languages because in all these organizations, Dutch is not an official language, except the EU. There we are an official language. And therefore, you have to learn your languages in order to communicate and to participate in meetings and interact with other diplomats and international officers. Because only 25 million people in the world speak Dutch. So we speak Dutch in the Netherlands. We are 17 million. And then we have the kingdom comprises not only of the Netherlands and Europe, but also 6 islands in the Caribbean, Curaçao, Aruba, Bonaire, St. Martin, and 2 very small ones, Saba and St. Eustatius. All in all, less than 100,000 people, I think, live there, but they all speak Dutch. Suriname, which was a former colony in South America, also up until today, they speak Dutch. The official language is Dutch. Belgium, as you know, is a country with 2 languages, 3, but 2 main ones. In the south part, they speak French, and in the north part, they speak Dutch. So that's also a part of the Dutch language territory. And in South Africa, English is the official language, but you have the Afrikaner, which are the original inhabitants of South Africa. They speak a kind of Dutch. It's more the Dutch of 200 years ago. If you read books of 200 years ago and you hear the Afrikaner speak, it is more or less the same language. So the language in the Netherlands has evolved, and in South Africa it has stayed the way it used to be. And in Indonesia. Indonesia was also a colony of the Netherlands for many years. And when I lived there from 95 till 98, large part of the population, especially the elder ones in cities, they still spoke Dutch. Of course, that is all gone now. The Dutch is not taught anymore in this in Indonesia, but let's say the elderly population, so 80 years and above, they still, many of them still speak Dutch. And of course, what is also important for us in the Netherlands to learn languages is that we have a deliberate policy in all our broadcasting agencies that when you see films or documentaries in the Netherlands on TV, it is not dubbed, so it's not translated or voiced over in Dutch, but the children or the people that listen to these programs, they listen and they hear the original language, and then it's subtitled in Dutch. So children and people get very often adapted to hear foreign languages, and that helps in learning foreign languages. And of course, the Netherlands is a very open society, so there are many foreigners living there, especially in the big cities like Amsterdam and Rotterdam and The Hague. And these people sometimes do not manage the Dutch language, so it's very customary if you go into a bakery and you speak to the lady on the counter in English or in French, that's not at all a problem. They will understand you and they will help you. And even today in the Netherlands, we have a huge shortage of labor. And so there are foreigners working in restaurants, in shops, and they don't speak Dutch. So you arrive in a restaurant and the waiter will address you in English instead of Dutch, and nobody is surprised. I mean, I think if here in a taqueria somebody would speak Portuguese or French, I think everybody would say, what's going on here? Why doesn't the person speak English or Spanish? But in the Netherlands, we are more or less accustomed to that. But the Netherlands is not the rule. I think in many large countries, for instance, the US, China, Russia, India, people do not speak foreign languages. And so therefore, that's also a necessity for you to learn the language in order to make yourself known when you travel to these countries. And until recently, that was also the case in many large European countries. 25 years ago, if you would travel to France, hardly anybody spoke another language except French. Germany, the same. UK, hardly any people 25 years ago spoke a foreign language in the UK. But with the globalization and the youth and the interest and the fact that you can travel very easy nowadays, the interconnected world with internet, smartphones, traveling, you see that youth picks up foreign languages much easier than their parents do. And therefore the knowledge of language increases very much. With a few clicks, you can be talking to someone somewhere else in the world, and then you need besides Spanish, you also need English to be able to communicate. In my professional life, going back a little bit to my own life, I always wanted to work in an international environment. That is because I passed part of my youth abroad, and I chose for the diplomacy. I could have also chosen for international business, which is my studies, but I decided to join the foreign services, and so yeah, in order to communicate, I had to learn languages. So Dutch was, of course, there. French, because of education, was there. English I learned at school. German as well. I wouldn't say I'm fluent in German. And 2 years ago, I started to learn Spanish. It was not easy for me. No fue muy fácil, pero después de 2 años es posible de hablar casi bien español. But I also learned Norwegian when I lived in Norway. That's a language that is fairly easy. If you know English, Dutch, and German, you can make a mezcla de los tres, and then you can manage in Norwegian fairly easy. And Bahasa Indonesia. I didn't need these languages for, let's say, professional reasons, but in order to communicate in the street, for shopping, restaurants, traveling, it was nice to know a few words and in order to get around. And why is it important to master these languages, not only professionally but also when you travel? I think first of all, it lowers barriers of trust. People like and people feel enthusiastic when you speak their language. It increases confidence also because this guy speaks the same language as me, so maybe we have a thing here together. So the trust level goes up when you speak a foreign language, but also that you show interest in other people's culture and other people's languages and other people's way of life. That's also part of knowing a language. But it can also, in negotiations, I've witnessed that a few times, it can give you tactical advantages, that you know a language, and I will give you a few examples of this. For instance, of the last one, when I lived in Hong Kong, I went a few times to China, and as I said, many Chinese do not speak English, although some understand. And so when you have a negotiation with the Chinese, they always use interpreters, so that they can speak Chinese, and although they understand English and they speak English, but they always speak Chinese, and they do this for 2 reasons. The first one is they have more time to react, because they do their sentences in Chinese, then the translator translates, and in this period they have time. You have time to come up with an answer, and you have time to prepare your answers. But what also is happening, and I noticed this a few times, is they speak in Chinese and they do as if they do not understand English, but they understand English. So you have to be very careful on our side what we discuss among each other, because we think they don't understand us, but they understand us. So that gives us a tactical advantage, because they can overhear and understand what we are talking about, although we think they don't understand it. But also, for instance, in the UN and in the EU, the UN has 6 official languages, and the EU has 24. We have 27 member states. That's the China part. But in the EU, we have 24 different languages. It's really complicated and very costly. So all the documents and all the meetings in the EU are translated into 24 languages. So you have huge meeting rooms with booths with the interpreters, and everything is translated. But in international fora, for instance, if you have international negotiations, to have informal chats besides the formal meetings, to get more trust, to get more confidence, it's good that you know another language besides your own, and that you know the language of the person you are talking to. As I said, in Indonesia and in Norway, you needed to know the language to get around. For instance, we had muchachas in Indonesia, but they only spoke Indonesian. So if you want to communicate with them on all kind of household activities, with the children, with the cooking, with the cleaning, whatever, you need to learn Bahasa Indonesia, at least these type of words and languages, in order to make yourself known and to make clear what you want. And sometimes it's nice for an opening. If you come into an international environment and you see a French person, that you can address him immediately in French, or you see a Spanish-speaking person, you can address him in Spanish. These are kind of ice-breaking openings that you can use. And it gives more insight in countries. For instance, in Mexico, there are no English newspapers. All the newspapers are in Spanish. And therefore, for me, professionally, if I want to know what's going on in Mexico, I have to see the news in the evening. I have to learn. I have to read the newspapers, and I must learn Spanish. Otherwise, I cannot see what's going on in the country if you don't know how to speak Spanish. Where are we? Yeah. So therefore, nowadays also, if you have, there are many statistics about the importance of mastering a second or a third language. Also for job requirements. I think if you will graduate in not a long time, and probably in any job offer you have, as a recent graduate, they will ask if you speak English. And if you don't speak English and only speak Spanish. Okay, thank you. So then the English is necessary. And if you become an intermediate executive or a middle manager, not only 50% of the job offers require English, but the percentage increased to 65%. And I think if you become a senior manager, a CEO of a company, it's mandatory to speak English in Mexico. So that's also a reason to invest in languages. Regarding the economic factor, a recent study states that knowledge of other additional languages allows access to more job offers, so you have more opportunities, and then only, let's say, national-oriented jobs, and especially 27.5 more than those who do not know other languages. So you have an advantage over other candidates if you speak the languages. A few other facts. Most of the information on internet regarding fact and scientific research is in English, so that states the relevance and the importance of English. So if you do not speak English, basically you're missing a lot. It's difficult to participate in the globalized world. And if you speak Spanish and English, and I think everybody in this audience does, you can communicate with 1 out of every 3 persons in the world, which is a tremendous advantage. If for me or a Dutchman, we speak Dutch and English, I don't think we can speak to 1/3 of the people in the world, because the whole Latin America and Spain is excluded. And 60% of the content on the World Wide Web is in English, so that's also a significant percentage. So a few recommendations for you students, although I think you're well on the way, otherwise you wouldn't have understood anything of the presentation I held for the last 25 minutes. Keep studying English. English is a different language. It has very subtle meanings of certain words, and for instance, if you say, do stay for dinner, you would think, okay, I can stay for dinner, but that means please go. You're not invited for dinner. And so they have these very subtle things, and you must learn them as well in order to really understand what a British person says. Learn as many languages as possible. It's always helpful. It's also a joy, because it opens up a whole new world, a whole new literature field, and it enriches your life. And if you, besides studying here at the university, you can also listen to podcasts and to movies and to all kind of digital devices in order to augment your knowledge of a foreign language. And finally, this is my quote to end. In your hands, you have the power to stand out for yourself by knowing more languages. Thank you very much. I'm open for questions, of course. How do we proceed? Do people have questions? Just raise your hand, or how shall we do it? La primera es cada vez un poquito difícil, pero ¿quién quieres empezar con una pregunta? Sí, señor.
When you think that you already can manage a language, when you think in that language, or you have to think in your own language and then translate?
Let's say for me, my personal experiences, for me, I do not have to think when I speak English or French. So it has become so natural, and I can switch from one language to another sans aucun problème. Je peux changer en français, en anglais, il n'y a aucun problème. In Spanish, yes, I have to prepare a sentence and of course the grammar and falta de vocabulario, so that makes it more difficult. But sometimes in the past, when I was a young kid, I dreamt also in French, for instance, but that's, now it's more Dutch, again. But they say that you can learn anything in 10,000 hours. I think in 10,000 hours you can become a physician, you become a language teacher, you can become a good tennis player. 10,000 hours of training is a bit the average to learn a language.
Just as a curiosity, which language was the hardest for you to learn and why? Because when you're a child, it's easy to absorb languages, but as you grow older, what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, I agree with you. Over the years, it becomes more difficult to learn. So let's say English and French came pretty natural, especially French, because I was forced to learn it in school. I would say Spanish nowadays, because I'm over 60 and having to learn the language is quite an effort. French helps me a lot because the vocabulary is the same, the grammar build-up is more or less the same. And I'm very lazy in doing my homework, so that's also.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Je me demande, une personne comme vous, comment vous faites pour pas mélanger les langues? Me pregunto cómo una persona como usted no mezcla los idiomas. Gracias.
Sí, merci. Yeah, for me, let's say English, Dutch, and French, it's not a problem to mix. But if you ask me now, can I produce 5 sentences in Norwegian? No, I would really have to think very hard. And what is the strange phenomena? If you learn a new language, your weakest language comes up because it's somewhere in the back of your head. And when you start to learn a new language and you really have to make an effort, the brain apparently works in such a way that the weakest language come up and you have to put that aside in order to let in the new language. But for me, French, English, and Dutch are so natural that I can switch very easy. So if you're with a group of 3, an Englishman, a Frenchman, and me, I can switch very easy. But that's only with these 3. Just in German, Spanish, or other languages, that's much more difficult. I really have to think, okay, now it's German, or how does this go? No.
Oui, est-ce que vous pensez qu'il faut avoir une certaine prédisposition génétique pour avoir plus de facilité d'apprendre une langage?
Est-ce que vous pouvez enlever le couvre-boca parce que j'entends pas trop bien?
Si vous pensez qu'il faut avoir une certaine prédisposition génétique pour apprendre une langage d'une manière plus facile?
Oui, je crois oui, parce que The question is, do you need to have some generic build-up or
Il y a une certaine
advantages in which you easier learn a language than somebody else? I think that's true. I think for me, I'm not too good in mathematics, physics, chemics, all these kind of stuff. I'm more on the language side. So I learn languages quite fast. But for instance, my wife, she has much more difficulty in learning a language. So I think there's a generic or a neurological, how do you call this, thing in your brain that some people learn faster than others. Yeah, I think it's true. I don't know if there are medical students here that then testify to that, but I think, in my experience, I think it's true, yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir. I'm very proud to be here to ask you one question. According to your professional career for so many years, and you also know so many languages, which language, maybe one or two, will be most recommendation for the students here, because they already know Spanish and they already know English. But I mean, maybe Russia for the next world or next century, which language you recommend them to learn for their career, to enter the UN, to enter the world? Thank you.
Well, the answer is going to be a difficult one because I think it's Chinese. I think everybody in the next century will get involved with China one way or the other, be it economically, be it political, be it in social. China is here and China is not going away. And for instance, as I said, I was an inspector before, and I traveled around the world, and I inspected our embassy in Beijing for 3 weeks, and I had a discussion with other ambassadors as well of the EU, and of the 27 countries that have an embassy in Beijing, only one ambassador spoke Chinese. And I spoke about this with this Chinese-speaking ambassador. He was a French ambassador. And he said, can you imagine that countries would send an ambassador to the US, which is the other global power in the world, and the person does not speak English? That is for us, that is impossible. You cannot send somebody to the US who does not speak English. But we send people to China who do not speak Chinese. And for the Chinese, that is incomprehensible. They don't understand that. They said, why do these people not make an effort to learn our language? We are a big power, we are forced to stay here, etc., etc. And in a way, that I think there was a truth in that notion. And therefore, also in the Dutch schools, you see that quite a few students, and it starts in primary school already, when the kids are 9, 10 years old, they try to start learning Chinese because it's going to be there as a major force in the future. So for me, Chinese would be the choice.
Okay, we have 2 more questions left from the auditorium.
Mr. Ambassador, in the auditorium there are students of the international relation. Could you share with us your experience in Kabul, Afghanistan?
Yes.
Thank you.
I have 2 experiences. The first experience is that was when I was working in the ministry, and I was responsible in the Asia and Oceania Directorate. I was responsible for Afghanistan as one of the countries in that part of the world. And that was from 2002 till 2006. As you know, in December 2001, the Western forces chased out the Taliban, and that was after the attack on the World Trade Centers. So I was there from the beginning, from 2002, when the Western troops came, and we started our development cooperation program. We started our program to do, let's say, institution building in Afghanistan, because the country was totally upside down. There were no institutions, there was no money, there was no central bank, there was no police force, there was no army, it was all basically gang-related and decentralized. So in these 4 years, I was there I visited the country 3-4 times a year, so I was there many, many times, and every time I came, I saw a little bit of progress, although the level of initiation was very low, much lower than any country in Africa, for instance. And then in 2007, I was asked to become a temporary ambassador for a few months because our ambassador had left, and they wanted somebody to man the shop, basically, for a few months until they found a replacer. So I was there for 4 months. Yeah, it's tragic what's happening. What happened last year in Afghanistan, that the Taliban was able to basically become again in power. And with Western countries, we really are puzzled, and we really talk a lot. Where did we go wrong? What went wrong that we could not stay the course and develop this country into a, let's say, modern is not the right word, but into a country which could stand on its own feet, had a minimum of development, a minimum of security, a minimum of social well-being, economic development. And yeah, I think my analysis, my personal analysis, is that we were too impatient. You cannot, let's say, develop a country which was so basically developed in 20 years' time. And we were so patient to do it fast, with a lot of money, etc., etc. And basically, yeah, we left too early with our military, with the development cooperation never left, but when we left the military, yeah, the country was not able to stand on its own feet. And, but I'm happy to give another lecture for the international relations students on this, because there's much to know and there's much to learn about our experience in Afghanistan. But it's tragic that we did manage to stay the course, basically, because the country is really bad off now. I mean, 50% of the population, all the women, are confined to their homes, are not allowed to work, cannot go to school. So basically, you eliminate 50% of your population. That is not the way to develop a country. You need 100% of your population to develop a country, and not only the men. And that's actually what's happening in Afghanistan nowadays.
Hi, I am a little
Morning.
nervous and my heartbeat is a little quickly.
No worries.
I have a question for you, and do you think it's more easier learning another language, going to an exchange, or learning from outside, like in an institution or in this country, or going to an exchange?
Yeah, my experience is and I think it's true, is that when you're inside the country and you hear the language all day around you, you read it on billboards, you see it in restaurants, in newspaper stands, etc. I think if you're submerged in a country and in that language, you learn it faster than in study books at home. That's my experience. In Dutch we have a saying that the best way to learn a language is in bed with the people from that country, talking the whole day to each other. That is the best way to learn a language. Yeah. En taal leer je op het kussen, hè, Sander? You know this. It's your experience probably as well. So no, go to the country and stay there. An exchange semester. I don't know if La Salle probably has exchange programs with other universities. Yeah, go on if you can afford it, go on an exchange semester to another country and yeah, really submerge in the country and in life, and then you learn it faster than from study books. Absolutely. I think time is up. It was a pleasure to be here with you. I really enjoyed it. I hope it's also an incentive for you to learn more languages than Spanish, which is your native language, and English, which you learn probably at the university, but see also maybe other languages, French. A few people speak already French, I understood. So very good. Good luck, not only at university, but also later in your professional lives. Muchas gracias.
Now, next, we will listen to the message that Brother José Francisco Flores Gamio, rector of La Salle University, has prepared for this significant celebration. Let's receive him with a warm applause.
distinguidas autoridades de la Universidad La Salle, excelentísimo señor Wilfred Theo Mohr, embajador del Reino de los Países Bajos, muy queridos docentes, colaboradores administrativos y estudiantes, especialmente de nuestro Centro de Lenguas. Es un verdadero gusto saludarlos hoy aquí de manera presencial, al tiempo que saludarlos por la vía remota a quienes nos siguen amablemente en esta transmisión. El lenguaje humano parece ser un fenómeno único, sin análogos significativos en el mundo animal. Esto lo ha dicho Noam Chomsky. Situándonos en el contexto del año 1972, que es el inicio de la década de los años 70, como bien ya lo decía el señor embajador, la cultura de esa época no transcurría entre las ideas de aldea global o de internacionalización, o en vez de hablar de lo local como opuesto a lo global, llegando a crear el neologismo glocal. ¿Por qué entonces una universidad, a 10 años de su fundación, habrá inaugurado un centro de lenguas? El mismo señor embajador se sorprendía que nuestra universidad había tenido esa visión. La respuesta puede parecer muy obvia, pero quizás no lo es. En realidad, la primera respuesta a la pregunta de por qué la Universidad La Salle inauguró su centro de lenguas a inicios de la década de los 70 es porque corresponde a una herencia, ya que el origen de las instituciones lasallistas se sitúa en Francia hacia el año 1682. Y la razón complementaria es la clara visión futurista de quienes dirigían la universidad en esos años, al darse cuenta de que ya marchábamos por los caminos que nos conducirían a la ahora aldea global, y que lo local y lo global convivirían en un nuevo concepto. So, let's give us a well-deserved recognition to this vision of the future, which today brings us to a present in which it will be impossible to think of De La Salle University without its language center. And now, let us ask ourselves if there are still reasons to keep our language center in operation. There is no doubt. Today, our language center is essential for the development of the communication skills of our students, teachers, and administrative staff. In addition to fulfilling the requirement of the transversal curriculum, the Language Center has the potential, for those who decide so, to lead us into new and unknown worlds, as vast as human culture and as interesting as our brain functions. Cesar Chavez, a descendant of Mexican immigrants and precursor of the collective rights of workers in the United States of America, already said it. A language is an exact reflection of the character and growth of its speakers. In other words, language conditions the complex development of human reasoning, and human reasoning is attached to the semantic capacity of the language that expresses it. Proof of this are German logic and philosophy, which have parallels in the way they structure the elements of a sentence and their way of building their philosophical reasoning. But not only is language related to the rational process of the mind, but it also assumes characteristics of its environment and reflects them in its expression, which gradually takes shape in the culture of the people and the place. The American writer Rita Mae Brown already said, language is the roadmap of a culture. It tells us where its people come from and where they are going. And it is in that, indeed, the classic and traditional cultures of humanity express us through their own language, their trajectory, their history, and their way of solving life, while also outlining the course that it will take in the future. It is enough here to remember ancient Eastern cultures that preserve their language, such as China, Japan, and India. Given the influence between language, reason, culture, traditions, and direction, let's finally talk about the importance of learning different languages at the time when Google Translate can translate from one language to another without having to master them. L'empereur et conquérant Charlemagne a dit: avoir une autre langue, c'est posséder une seconde âme. Ainsi, Google ou tous autres systèmes de traduction simultanée, qu'ils soient écrits ou verbaux, ne nous mettra dans la position d'avoir une seconde âme, c'est-à-dire de doubler notre conscience de nous-mêmes et de le monde qui nous entoure. D'autre part, Edmond de Waal, céramiste et écrivain britannique, déclare: avec les langues, vous êtes chez vous n'importe où. Fort de sa vaste expérience internationale et de son origine multiethnique, il s'est rendu compte, de plus jeune, que parler d'autres langues que sa langue maternelle vous amène au-delà du pragmatisme de la communication fonctionnelle dans un pays étranger, car cela vous met en contact avec des personnes originaires et vous connecte avec sa culture, que vous vous appropriez peu à peu. Vous finirez donc par vous sentir chez vous quand vous avez communiqué dans sa propre langue. Enfin, l'apprentissage des langues vous connecte non seulement avec la culture du peuple, mais vous permet également d'aller au-delà de l'esprit de l'interlocuteur. Car selon le combattant contre la discrimination et le racisme de son Afrique du Sud natale et défenseur des droits des premiers peuples africains, Nelson Mandela nous a dit: si vous parlez à un homme dans une langue qu'il comprend, cela lui mettra dans sa tête. Si vous lui parlez dans sa propre langue, cela touchera son cœur. En termes simples, parler la langue d'autres vous conduit finalement au cœur même de vos interlocuteurs. Et s'il y a un moment dans l'histoire de l'humanité où nous avons besoin de cette compréhension entre les peuples et les nations, c'est bien le présent. Les invasions, les guerres et toutes les absurdités seraient moins probables si nous nous connections non seulement avec le cerveau d'autres peuples, mais avec le propre cœur et avec le nôtre. Je vais terminer ce message en exhortant la communauté universitaire à redoubler des efforts pour pouvoir communiquer dans différentes langues. Si nous croyons que nous vivons le moment de l'internationalité, nous devons faire les efforts qui nous conduiront à faire de cette qualité une réalité. Si nous ne faisons pas tomber les barrières que représentent les langues étrangères pour notre ouverture aux autres cultures, il nous sera difficile de progresser sur la voie de l'internationalité. Si nous osons briser ces barrières linguistiques et les transformer en ponts communicatifs, la réalité de notre université par rapport à l'internationalité ira si loin qu'aujourd'hui nous n'imaginons pas. Parce que, comme l'a déclaré le cinéaste Federico Fellini déjà citée par notre maître Rosario, une langue différente est une vision différente de la vie. Así que, nuevamente, rindamos honor a quienes visualizaron nuestra comunidad universitaria explorando nuevos horizontes con la inauguración hace 50 años del Centro de Lenguas de la Universidad La Salle. Pero sobre todo, escribamos ahora las nuevas páginas inéditas del 61º año de servicio de la Universidad La Salle y del 51º año de funcionamiento del Centro de Lenguas, retándonos a enriquecernos con el aprendizaje de otros idiomas adicionales a nuestra bella lengua materna, el español. Por este 50º aniversario bendecimos a Dios, imploramos la protección de su Madre sobre nosotros y nuestros seres queridos y nos inspiramos en San Juan Bautista de La Salle para seguir creando y transformando. Muchas gracias y porque lo que está unido vuelve a ver el amanecer, indivisa manen. Bueno, pues será un gran honor poder develar esta placa que conmemora estos 50 primeros años de servicio del Centro de Lenguas en todas sus modalidades y pues nos da mucho gusto el poder estar presentes en esta ceremonia. Le pedimos a la maestra nos haga favor de recorrer el cordón. Le pedimos al maestro José María Aramburu nos haga favor de leer el contenido de esta placa.
Muchas gracias. 50 años unidos por los idiomas, Centro de Idiomas. La Universidad La Salle otorga el presente reconocimiento al Centro de Idiomas por 50 años de compromiso en la enseñanza de los idiomas, 1972-2022. Indivisa Manen, Ciudad de México, 24 de agosto de 2022. Muchas felicidades.
Les agradezco a todos su presencia, en verdad es una celebración muy emotiva, 50 años se dicen fácil, pero han sido muchos años de mucho trabajo, de toda la gente que estuvo antes que nosotros, toda esa dedicación y el creer en los idiomas. Entonces, a los alumnos, de verdad, sigan estudiando, es muy importante, los idiomas son lo que les va a dar el impulso y la fuerza para seguir adelante y van a tener muchas oportunidades. Aprovechen que esta gran universidad les ofrece y tenemos un centro de idiomas para que ustedes participen. A todos los que están aquí, a todos los docentes que siempre están dedicados a enseñarles nuevas técnicas, todo para que ustedes de verdad aprendan. Les agradecemos muchísimo a todo el Centro de Idiomas, a todos los alumnos, por supuesto a todas nuestras autoridades que siempre están atrás de nosotros. Muchas gracias.
Pero yo quisiera hacer extensiva esta invitación que ha hecho la maestra Rosario, no solamente para que los actuales estudiantes sigan en este paso de seguir aprendiendo más lenguas. Hay un gran grupo de colaboradoras y colaboradores en toda la universidad que pueden aprovechar este centro. Y ustedes mismos, jóvenes estudiantes, pueden invitar a otras personas, aunque no sean estudiantes de alguna licenciatura o algún programa de la universidad, a venir al Centro de Lenguas. Queremos que el Centro de Lenguas acoja a muchas personas y sea un gran potencial para este sentido internacional de la universidad. Así es que, a partir de este 51º año de funcionamiento, queremos extender mucho nuestros servicios. Muchas gracias y enhorabuena.